Coming up on this episode, I'm joined by my Blue Man Hoop colleague Griffin Gamble to discuss the Warriors' strong 6-2 start to the season. We take a quick look back to the win over the Detroit Pistons on Monday, outline some of our major positives and negatives from the season to date, and look ahead to the big matchup against the Denver Nuggets on Wednesday. Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can follow me at POK252, that's POK252, on Twitter. And Griffin as well, he's at Gamble_Griffin3 as well. Thanks again to him for coming on this episode. Looking forward to having him back on again in the future. But for now, enjoy the episode. Welcome, Griffin. The Warriors off to a strong 6-2 start through the first 8 games. How are you enjoying the season today?
Oh man, first off, I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me back on the show. Glad to be back, and yeah, I'm enjoying the season a lot. Like you said, 6-2, what a great start. I kind of was worried that maybe it would kind of be slower out of the gates. Kind of an older team. You got CP3 coming in. I was a little worried about that. Maybe a slow start, a bunch of games on the road. You know how awful we were on the road last year. So I was a little worried about that. So a 6-2 start is I'm more than happy with that. We snuck out of Detroit with a win last night. It was one of those games where you hold your breath, like, oh boy, we're really gonna lose to the Pistons. But we snuck out of there with a win. I'll take it. And moving on to Denver.
Yeah, that was an ugly win, but it's also one of those ones where we'd probably lose that game last season. I mean, we did lose in Detroit. It's basically the same time 12 months ago. And it looked like that was going to be the case. The Pistons were up 5 early in the fourth quarter, and then fortunately, the Warriors closed on a 27-12 run to get it done. Steph goes for 34, has 16 in the first quarter. Chris Paul, he's probably had more important stretches, I think, throughout games, but in terms of just a full, consistent four-quarter performance, probably his best with a season high 17 points in less than 22 minutes. I mean, I'm the same as you. It's kind of one of those ones where you just move on from it. You take the 11-point win. Actually, it's kind of funny how, for as ugly as it was and for as bad as it looked through most of the game, they actually covered the line. I think the line was 8.5 or 9.5. So they actually won by, I guess, more than expectation, which is kind of surprising in the end. Is there anything else that you would have taken away from that game, or even if you had any thoughts on the Cavs game the night before?
Yeah, I guess going back to the Cavs game, I just think that of our two losses, I think Fitz mentioned it on the broadcast before. I think out of our two losses, we've shot sub 40%. So, I mean, if you take that into consideration, really, if we have a above average shooting game, we're most likely going to win, which is awesome. So going back to the Cavs game, I guess really got dominated inside. Mobley and Jared Allen. I mean, they're the Twin Towers for a reason. So I kind of expected to be out rebounded a lot in the paint. We couldn't get in the paint, couldn't score in the paint. So yeah, I Detroit was interesting because Wiggins. We'll get into that a little bit more, I believe. But Wiggins didn't play once in the fourth quarter, which is really strange. I know he's been struggling, so we'll get into that. But yeah, other than that, so far so good on the road.
Yeah, I mean, to have a 5-1 record has been absolutely exceptional. I think that Cavs loss was almost like a scheduled loss, not too concerned. I said after that game that as long as they win in Detroit, like there's no real stress about losing that Cavs game. And fortunately, they were able to just get the job done in Detroit. Let's get on to some positives and negatives through the first 8 games of the season. I'll let you go first. Let's start on a good note with a positive take from you.
Yeah, all right. I'll take the easy one then. I think it's got to be Steph. I mean, what a start to the season. When you have to go back to 2016 to talk about how good he's been, that was his unanimous MVP year. If he's comparing to that, then you know he's doing something special. What is he at, like 30 a game? First player in NBA history with 4+ threes in 8 straight games. I think he broke his own record with that one. He's on pace to shatter his 402 threes in a season. So if he stays healthy, which selfishly, I just for his stats, I really want to see him play maybe close to all 82 because he could shatter that 402 3-point record, which is insane. But yeah, I just don't think you can say enough about him. Last night he exploded in Detroit in the first quarter, and the Pistons fans were pretty much cheering for him. I mean, I think I mentioned it on the last episode. I think we just have to be so grateful for being able to watch him and have him be our superstar. I mean, there's just I'm running out of words to describe him at age 35, in his if whatever 15th season or whatever it is. So yeah, just really happy with how he's played and kind of carried the team so far.
Yeah, it's been absolutely unbelievable. Like, so 30.9 points per game on 53% shooting from the floor, 47.5 from 3-point range, and 91.3% from the free throw line. It's been absolutely unbelievable. Now, the interesting thing for me is like he's averaging 31.8 minutes per game, which is clearly a career low, and he's been at over 34 for each of the last 3 seasons. Do you think he should be playing more? Or with Chris Paul coming in, obviously he can eat up those backup point guard minutes and kind of solidify the second unit to the point where Steph can have minutes, riding the bench for, extended time, I suppose. Would you like to see him playing more at times?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's gonna be by like a game basis because last night I wish he would have played more. Because in that first quarter he erupted in that first quarter and Steve took him out at his scheduled time. And I would maybe like to see Steve just let him ride that one out. Let him see how far we can build that lead because we were up almost double digits and he takes him out and then we kind of go into a lull offensively. So I think if you just let him ride it out when he's hot and just keep him in the game maybe for some minutes that he wasn't supposed to play. That would be my only suggestion, I guess, for Steve would be let him ride those minutes out because you never know he could erupt and have the lead go to 15 in that stretch. And I think he came back in the game and he was like 1 for 8, I think, after that. So he definitely cooled off a little bit. So I think it's just by a game basis. If he's hot, maybe leave him in 33, 34 minutes. But other than that, the way Chris has been holding down the bench, I don't mind it at all. Which is funny because with recent years, when Steph's out of the game, I would be like, yeah, this is not going to go well.
Yeah, I know like a lot of fans have been frustrated about I guess, yeah, pulling him out at, 3, 4 minutes left in the first quarter rather than letting him ride the old 12-6, 12-6 kind of rotation that, Steph became accustomed to, I suppose, for so many years. And, the fact that if you go back to yesterday's game, like Detroit, young, slightly undermanned team as well, and you go on a 14-0 run, you go up 7 in the first quarter. Steph has 16 points, 4 or 5 from deep. I think in that scenario, like there's a genuine chance, like, if you leave him in for the rest of the quarter, could he go for 25? Could the Warriors put up 40 points as a team? Could they be up 15? And I think in that scenario, if that were to happen, that's really demoralizing to a young Pistons team. And I think at that point, taking him out with 3, 4 minutes left, the Pistons were able to come back and make it. I think the Warriors were still up 5 at the end of the first quarter, but they feel like they're in the game at that point. They feel like they can still cause an upset win, as opposed to being up double digits and, really demoralizing them with the Steph onslaught in the first quarter. So I think in that perspective and in that situation, I think Steve could have played it a little bit differently, but that might be being a little bit hypercritical. Just one more thing on the Steph thing, and this kind of leads into my major positive. So only one Warrior outside of Steph has had a 20-plus point game through 8 games, which of all players was Dario Saric against the Thunder back on Friday night. Like, is that a positive or a negative to you?
Gosh, that's a great point. I think you could go both ways. I think it could be a positive and a negative because first off, I didn't think Dario was going to have the impact that he did. So I'm really happy about that he's the only other 20 plus point scorer. But I think it can definitely be looked at like negatively just because of how Wiggins and Clay, what they expect from themselves and what we expect from them. So I guess it could go both ways. It's a nice, well balanced attack, but also I would like to see nights where, Clay and Wiggs kind of help out Steph and really emerge as that second scorer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this was my major positive first positive was just the depth on the roster. So the Warriors have got 13 players who can practically all play. and I don't think like
Hmm.
any of the minutes from anyone are going to necessarily be an absolute disaster. There's no one there where Steve's looking down the bench and thinking, "Geez, I really don't want to play that guy." And we've seen impressive minutes from Trace Jackson Davis, Brandon Pajemski. Now Corey Joseph did have a disastrous 3 minutes and 41 seconds in the season opener against the Suns. We basically haven't seen him since. I think he played the garbage time minutes maybe against the Pels, and that was about it. Uh, I don't, and he might have played against the Cavs briefly the other night for like 2 minutes. But either way, like I don't think he's still like a disaster either. I know that season opener wasn't great. I still think he could be utilized at some point, and it's not gonna be too much of a concern kind of thing. And I think the depth on this roster has really been showcased by the fact that they've just signed Guy Santos to the 14th roster spot, which is a bit of a surprise move because the whole time throughout the offseason we thought this is going to be a veteran player. This is someone that Steve's going to have trust in to play 5, 10, 15 minutes every now and again kind of thing to kind of plug in holes where needed. We saw, Rudy Gay and Roddy Magruder were the two really fighting out for that spot in training camp. Ended up going to neither player. With the CBA rules, the Warriors had to sign someone within a 14-day period from the season starting. And it ends up being Guy Santos, who's a 21-year-old. The Warriors drafted him with the 55th pick a couple of years ago. Played with Santa Cruz, played in Summer League. I spoke a lot about him, wrote a little bit about him during Summer League. He was really impressive, showed a lot of great improvement through that campaign. But the fact that you're signing a 21-year-old, talented but unproven 6'7" forward who is basically just going to be in Santa Cruz again the whole of this season. Like he's going to have no impact really on this Golden State main roster and actually playing this season. So the fact you're not wasting a roster spot because Guy Santos, who knows, hopefully he develops into a really good rotation player for the Warriors in time. But for this season alone, it kind of is wasting a roster spot. But they can actually afford to do that because they've got 13 guys who are capable of playing on any given night, in any given situation. So, full credit to Mike Dunleavy Jr. And the rest of the front office for putting together a roster that allows them to kind of take a flyer with the 14th roster spot rather than signing a 35, 36, 37-year-old veteran who's probably over the hill, but would provide you some experience at least and maybe veteran leadership in the locker room.
I would agree with you. It feels weird when Steph goes to the bench. It feels okay, which is just kind of like has been not normal for a couple years. You kind of hold your breath when he would go to the bench. So the fact that, like you said, we've got plenty of guys. They sent down Pods and Trace Jackson Davis to Santa Cruz, and then like a day later brought him back because I think they realized they just bring a good energy to the group, and can definitely provide some minutes. So I've been so happy with those two. But yeah, I love that positive. I think the depth is really shown, and it's really nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been a big takeaway, I think, so far, particularly after last season where the Warriors bench was, horrific. And you look down the end of the roster, you had the likes of Ryan Rollins, Patrick Baldwin Jr., who were offering very, very little, if nothing, basically. You had Iggy, who was injured the entire the entire season, practically played what 8 games, I think, or whatever it was,
Yeah.
6 games maybe. And then Steve was really relying on the two-way guys in Anthony Lamb, Ty Jerome. As this season, like two-way guys, Jerome Robinson, Usman Garuba, Lester Quinones is not even getting a look in, and don't need to be getting a look in, and will get plenty of run with Santa Cruz. You got another positive for us?
Yeah, definitely. My second one has got to be Chris Paul on the bench. I think it just has. We've talked about it a little bit already this pod, but I mean Chris Paul. I think I saw last night a tweet: 29 assists and 0 turnovers in his last 4 games. Um, I don't want to dog on Jordan Poole at all, but just a complete 180 from Jordan Poole, right? I mean, when Jordan would come in the game, it was lots of scoring, lots of highlight plays, but the turnovers and the bad decisions was just hard to live with. So now you have a guy that comes in and doesn't turn the ball over and has insanely high assist numbers. I mean, you can't ask for anything better. It's exactly what we needed. But then I think you can mention, like we talked about Dario Saric. I mean, what an addition. No one really talked about that this offseason. He's out here hitting multiple threes a game, holding his own on the defensive end. I mean, he's been awesome. And then you got to round out that second five. You got GP2, you got Moody, and you got Kaminga all playing great. Just looking ready for the moment, and I've been so happy with that. I mean, to see Steve sub five in and sub five out, that he has the confidence to do that with that five unit. And as they go, it's only been 8 games, and look how good they look. So as it goes on, I think the season goes on, it's just going to look better and better. And that second group was awesome. So that's got to be my second positive for sure.
Yeah, and the fact there's still like so much room for improvement, like
Mhm.
Chris Paul's shooting 36% from the floor and 13.8% from 3-point range.
Yeah,
A guy that is a career 47% and basically 37% 3-point shooter. He spoke about after the game yesterday, obviously getting back to a little bit of normality with his shooting, going 6 of 9, made a couple of threes, and he spoke about it that hopefully there's a push back to the law of averages would suggest that I'm going to start making some baskets here and the jump shot will start falling. So, and even I think Moody's shooting has probably regressed a little bit over the
yeah,
last few games compared to the opening few games. That's bound to happen, but there's so much improvement left in him. Kaminga, who I'm going to speak about in a second. Peyton's been really good, I think. Saric, uh, still probably not. Like I think he could shoot. I actually don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think he could probably shoot the ball a little bit better. I know he was like 27% from the floor after the first few games. So yeah, with more time, more experience playing together, more cohesiveness, that group should really start to come into its own. And I do think that as I've said multiple times, this should be a top 5 bench in the league. Uh, a couple other positives for me, I suppose, just to get onto. I just wanted to give Draymond a shout out and what he's doing offensively. So 10.3 points per game. I know it's a small sample size, like he's played 6 games, missed the first 2, but I'm surprised with how well he's come back from that. I know, minor ankle injury out for a month or so, but I've been pleasantly surprised by 46.7% from the floor, which is okay. It's not great. It's actually a little bit down on last season, but 42.9% from three, and looks confident taking them, particularly early in games. There's still some misses kind of at the rim sometimes where he doesn't quite fully attack and he might have a floater or something that's an air ball. Like he has those 1 or 2 misses a game kind of thing. That's just what Draymond does, I think. But overall, like I've been pleasantly surprised by his just general aggressiveness offensively. He's still averaging 6.8 assists, I think, per game, which I actually expected that to go down a little bit with the presence of Chris Paul coming in. But I've again been pleasantly surprised by the way in which those two have been able to mesh, and that should only get better with Chris Paul's shooting going up and hopefully becoming more of a 3-point threat for the Warriors. So I just wanted to mention that. The other one too, and this goes back onto Gary Payton II. Again, credit to, well, actually not Mike Dunleavy Jr. This goes back to Bob Myers. The whole Wiseman GP2 trade.
yep.
I was talking to someone about it yesterday after the game. That trade from a Detroit standpoint, I'd be so pissed off if I was a Pistons fan.
Yeah,
You bring in James. No, I get they wanted to take a flyer on a former number 2 overall pick with talent. Like I get it, but he's your 4th big man behind Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, and Marvin Bagley III. He's your 4th big man, and meanwhile you're actually lacking a bit on the wing, particularly with Bogdanovic out at the moment, and you traded Sadiq Bey for James Wiseman. That's a disaster for Detroit. It really
yep.
is. And from a Warriors standpoint, I think there was a bit of like my initial reaction to the trade when it happened back in February, which is quite nearly 12 months ago now, I suppose. But I remember like my initial reaction was like, did we really give up on Wiseman for GP2? Like I love GP2, but there's kind of like a ceiling on what he can be as a player and what he can do as a player. He's kind of this defensive specialist who plays really well in the Warriors system. But I just, at the time, I thought, could we have got more than that? Can we have got someone with a little bit higher of a ceiling as an individual player? But really, it's turned out to be a fantastic trade where Wiseman, unfortunately, is really struggling in Detroit, and GP2 is, part of closing lineups for Steve Kerr, where he is given his defensive capacity, his ability to go and harass perimeter guys. Like, it's been a hugely successful move. It's the last one that Bob Myers really made. And it's one that should, leave a reasonable legacy, hopefully, with Peyton playing a significant role for the Warriors over the next few years.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you definitely hit it on the head. GP2, I love him, and I think I saw a tweet last night that he played the most minutes in the fourth quarter. So when you don't even have Wiggs playing in the fourth, and then you have a guy like GP2 that was kind of going to be just a bench guy, and he's now, like you said, closing lineups. That's a huge move for us. And yeah, and Jalen Duren, he was out last night, but he's been playing so well that the Wiseman trade even looks worse now because I think he's younger than Wiseman, so that even looks worse. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. And to touch on Draymond, I just love the intensity that he brings. It was so good to have him back. I love the passing. I love that he's hitting threes, but I feel like he just brings that intensity that sometimes we lack on a night to night basis.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go a little bit negative now with a couple of things that have been on your mind, I suppose, over the first 8 games that have been a little bit of a negative from a Warrior standpoint.
Hmm. I think I gotta go with the obvious one again. I think it's Wiggins, unfortunately. Just a really disappointing start to the season. I think he's averaging like 10 points a game. Like I mentioned earlier, he didn't even play in the fourth quarter last night in Detroit. So really, it's just been really disappointing to see. And you almost wonder. I saw a tweet going around that Iggy, when he had that moment with him in the finals, like, do we bring Iggy back just for that, just to
Yeah,
kind of light
yeah,
that fire under Wiggs again, so we can get that finals Wiggs because we know what he's capable of, and it doesn't have to be scoring every night. We know what he's capable of defensively. He can take on the best wings in the NBA. He can rebound the ball exceptionally well. We saw that in the finals, and he took over Game 5 of the finals. That's a dude that went toe to toe with Tatum, took over a game in the finals, helped us win a finals. I just don't know what's been going on with him. It could be part of the reason that the absence was last year. Is that still lingering? Is that an issue for him? So I really am just I'm just disappointed a little bit with Wiggs, and I hope that he gets in a groove for this season moving forward.
yeah. 10.8 points on 41.5% from the floor, 17.6% from 3-point range.
Hmm.
53.6% from the free throw line, which I know frustrates so many fans. I've got to a point where whenever Wiggs gets fouled and goes to the line, I'm always like, geez, one of two here would be good.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
never have any confidence in him going 2 for 2. And,
Hmm.
like, if you've been watching Wiggs on the Warriors since he came in, 2020,
Hmm.
you know that you just have no confidence in him in making both free throws. He's averaging 3.4 rebounds per game, which I actually like. It's low. That's really bad. Quite down on last season where he was over 5, and then obviously what he did in the 2022 championship run, where I think that Game 5 you mentioned, I think he had 15 rebounds in that game. Like, he's a shell of himself right now. I actually thought yesterday's game, I couldn't fault the effort, and he was actually fairly active, and that's what my issue sometimes with Wiggs is. He's kind of gone back into this realm where, and I mentioned on the last podcast, like, he can play 10, 15 minutes, and he has no presence on the floor at all, and he's so passive, and you actually just forget that he's out there at times. I didn't really feel that against Detroit yesterday. I actually thought he was fairly active. He was trying to get to the offensive glass. He had 5 rebounds. He's had now, I think, 16 rebounds over the last 3 games, so that's an improvement, but it's not like he's grabbing 8 or 9 rebounds, and the scoring is just it's horrific. Now, this is the stat that blows my mind. So he shot 39.6%, basically 40% last season on threes, but on 6.1 attempts per game. He's averaging 2.1 3-point attempts so far this season. Four attempts less than last season. Like, can you put your finger on why? Like, he's to me, he's just clearly lost confidence in his jumper or his 3-point jumper at the very least. And so, anytime he actually does get an open look, it's no, let me try and drive here, or let me just kick it out to someone else, or like he's just not taking any. Now, I'm not actually sure. I'd probably need to go back and watch more film to see how many open looks he is getting that he could be taking. But that just stood out to me from 6.1 down to 2.1. Never mind
Mhm.
like the drop in percentage. Like, can you put your finger on that?
Yeah, gosh, I didn't know it was that far of a drop off, honestly. But it makes sense because it feels like he hasn't been really shooting the ball much. Um, but like you said, yeah, when he gets an open three, it's almost like he's trying to will it into the basket. Like he's like hoping that it goes in. He's not shooting it with confidence. And a lot of times he's settling for these tough mid-range jumpers, and I just kind of scratch my head at those, like the fadeaways, and those are it's almost the worst shot in basketball. I know we like to I know as the Warriors historically like to shoot mid-range shots, but a deep two and it's contested. It feels like for Wiggs all the time. It's just not a good shot. So I can't put my finger on it, but yeah, it's been pretty disappointing for me.
Mm. Yeah, I know. Like the Warriors have been trying to get him going. Like I actually like the game against the Thunder on Friday night. He had 17 points on 6 of 11 shooting, and I thought they did a really good job on a couple of out of bounds plays, just trying to get switches onto smaller guys in the post, letting him go to work there. But the issue is like he still misses some of those kind of jump hooks in the paint against
Hmm.
smaller opponents sometimes, which is really frustrating. And then whenever he gets fouled by them, he doesn't convert at the free throw line either. So like
Yeah.
it's nothing's really going well for him offensively. Just the last thing on Wiggs as well, because if you think that the 3-point attempts stat is absurd, through 8 games he has how many steals do you reckon he has? I'm just going to ask you actually, how many total steals do you reckon he has in 8 games?
Oh gosh, I feel like the number's gonna be really low, so I'm gonna shoot low. Maybe like 5 steals.
He has 1 steal.
Oh man.
He has one, and I know steal numbers like don't necessarily paint a picture of like how you're going defensively. Like I
Hmm.
get that, but to me that does signify that the defensive drop off as well, because at the moment like Steve's just preferring Gary Payton the second down the stretch because GP2 is a far better perimeter defender right now than Andrew Wiggins is, and if Wiggins is giving you nothing offensively, then Gary Payton is just legitimately a better player right now.
Yep.
He's just a better player. And so when I was like going through his, I saw one total steal. I was just
Hmm.
like, how? In 8 games, how have you got one total steal? Like that is
Yeah.
unbelievable. Anyway,
Mhm.
a negative for me. So in fact, my couple of negatives you could actually really take as a positive. So the starting unit right now, and Wiggins is a big part of this. The starting unit just sucks. Minus
Yeah.
19.3 in net rating with a defensive rating of 132.1. Like they cannot get any stops. And again, this goes back to if Wiggins isn't going to be the perimeter defender that you ideally want him to be and you need him to be, then you just can't get stops against some of these elite dynamic guards, that you're coming up against on every game basically. So that's a real problem. And again, like offensively, like their offensive rating's okay, but you're heavily relying on Steph. If you're not going to get any production from Wiggs, Draymond is, yes, shooting 42.9% from three, but we know that defenses aren't going to guard him out there. Looney's a non-shooting threat, although I did like the little mid-range jumper against the Pistons yesterday. I
Yes.
might, maybe one of those a game ain't actually that bad. And then
Hmm.
Clay he's actually been efficient at times in some of these games, but he's yet to have a 20-plus point game at all. So the starting lineup doesn't look good after being as the best basically starting lineup in the league last season. That's really regressed. I do wonder whether or not Chris Paul is looking around and thinking, hmm, like why is
Yeah.
Wiggins starting over me kind of thing. Like I know he's embraced this 6-man role, and I know that he's done a fantastic job so far, and there's probably no at 6-2, there's probably no real need to change it up. But the further this goes, and if Wiggins continues to struggle, and if this starting lineup, maintains at this kind of poor net rating, if I were Chris Paul, I'd be just looking around thinking, like, what are we doing here? Because the whole point, the primary reason why they would have gone to Chris Paul and said, can you come off the bench is obviously it's best for the team in terms of he's a guard and he's behind Steph and Clay, but also just the fact they did like this starting lineup had the best net rating of any starting lineup last season, and it's hard to argue against that if you're Chris Paul. Well, if that disappears, then like, what's the argument really? Like, what is Andrew Wiggins providing that Chris Paul couldn't provide more of? Like, if he's not going to rebound the ball, if he's not going to play perimeter defense, then you might as well have a 6 foot Chris Paul out there.
Yeah.
The other
Hmm.
thing is, so it's actually insane that the Warriors are 6-2 because so their starting unit is a minus 19.3, and then we spoke about the second unit where Steve is having kind of lengthy minutes with a whole bench unit of Paul, Peyton, Moody, JK, and Saric. Well, as impressive as we think they've been, they actually have a net rating of minus 7.3. So that's absurd to me because they're the two lineups that have been most used, that have played the most minutes together. The starting unit all as one, and then the bench unit all as one. And minus 19.3 and minus 7.3. Like, imagine saying your two most used lineups are getting significantly outplayed, and you are 6-2 on the season.
Hmm.
To further put it into context, of any unit to basically the only unit that has played more than the starting lineup that has a worse net rating is the Utah Jazz with a 5-man unit of Jordan Clarkson, Taylor Horton-Tucker, Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, and Walker Kessler. They're a minus 22.5 net rating. Well, the Utah Jazz are 2-6.
Hmm.
Like that reflects their record. It's incredible that the Warriors have actually got to 6-2 based on
Yeah.
some of these numbers. So it's a negative, yes, but it's also a positive that if the starting lineup can turn it around, and with the growth and added chemistry in the second unit, so much room for improvement in this team.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you hit that perfectly. It is a negative at this point, but like you said, if it turns around, imagine what the record could look like down the road
Mm.
if both those groups get going. I think really it just is a testament to Steph again. I know we've been showing him a lot of love this pod, but I feel like you have to. I feel like he just keeps us in every single game,
Yeah.
and eventually just wins them for us too at some points. So I think, yeah, lucky to be 6-2, happy to be 6-2. Thank you to Steph and obviously others, but thank you to Steph for sure. And like you said, hopefully that negative can turn into a real positive soon.
Yeah. Have you got any other? I've got one more. Have you got another negative that you wanted to touch on?
No, I was really I'm glad you mentioned that one. That was going to be kind of my second one, was really going to be just how that starting unit's really struggled. So I'm glad you touched on that because like you said, Chris is probably looking around like, hey, I'm here too. I'm playing well. So I'm glad you touched on that. That was what I was going to touch on.
Yeah, okay, cool. The last thing I wanted to touch on, and I'm not saying this is a negative, this is just a really weird one for me. I just tweeted about it an hour ago, but I'll let the listeners know again if they haven't seen it. Just want to read out Jonathan Kuminga's numbers over the last 3 games. And just, can you explain to me what the hell is going on here? Because I am absolutely stumped. I have no idea what's going on. So in his last 3 games, Thunder Friday night, Cavs Sunday, Pistons yesterday. His first half totals: 2 points on 1 of 15 shooting, 5 turnovers, and 4 fouls. That's his totals over the last 3 first halves. Second halves: 42 points on 15 of 22 shooting, 1 turnover, 3 fouls. But that's insane to me. Like,
Hmm.
2 points and 42 points. Like, why is he an astronomically better player in the second half than he is the first half? And now that's a 3 game sample size, but I feel like it's been a bit of a trend for longer than that across the first 8 games. Is it like, I don't get it. Can you explain? Have you got any reasoning as to why this is the case?
No, I have no reasoning at all, but I guess I'm gonna say I think of it more as a positive because old Jonathan to me, like a couple years ago, Jonathan, I feel like he would have just thrown in the towel at halftime, been like, you know what, it's not my night. I just don't have it tonight. So I think it's a testament to him and his growth on how he's been able to weather these bad stretches and really perform in the second half because we've needed it every game,
Mm.
honestly. And I also think it's a testament to Steve too because I think Steve in the past couple of years, if Jonathan was really struggling, would just kind of send him to the end of the bench and say, figure it out tomorrow night or figure it out the next night. So I think it's a testament to both of them how they've kind of stuck with it, and Steve has let him really play through those tough stretches, and I'm just glad that he's been able to turn it around in those games.
Yeah, I totally agree. Credit to both of them. The trust that Steve is putting in JK, I think, is ultimately paying off because JK does still
Mhm.
have the confidence to go out there in the second half and to make an impact. Like 17 points against the Thunder in the second half on Friday night. They don't win that game without his
Yep.
scoring output in the second half. He probably kept them in the game against Cleveland with 15 second half points. And even like yesterday, like he finishes 5 of 14 from the floor. It wasn't a great game, but he still has 10 points in the second half. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's something I'm going to be like closely following over these next few games and going forward because it's absurd to me this differential in first and second half performances. And it also, again, as you said, it's a major positive that if he can just string a 4 quarter consistent game together, like he's at the moment he's getting you double digits every night basically. Like he can push up to at least 15 points a game if he just has a slightly better first half than what we've
Mhm.
seen. It's quite amazing. But anyway, before I let you go, have you got any thoughts on this Denver matchup? Sounds like Jamal Murray is going to be out for them, so it's probably going to be a lot closer, I suppose, in the odds than what you may have thought, given Denver are so formidable on their home floor. Uh, do you give the Warriors much of a chance? Do you really care too much about it this early in the season?
Yeah, great question. I personally do care a lot about it. I think I care about every single game. That's just the fan in me. But I do think there's some weight in it because you're going to the defending champs' homes. It's tough to play there in general. It's tough to play in Denver. Jokic, I mean, they're so good at just next man up attitude. So I even if Jamal is out, I expect them to be a well-oiled machine still. I think it's gonna be a really good test for the Warriors because on the road they beat the Kings, which was great, but a couple like the Pistons, on the road that's not really a tough opponent. So going on the road and really seeing how you stack up against the defending champs, I think is going to be a great test for us. So I'm really looking forward to that game, and then obviously I'm looking forward to returning home though for a nice home stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that it's interesting because I said it on last episode. Like I think this might be a bit of a free hit. Like you're 6-2 if you return home, and you're 6-3 with the road schedule that they've had so far. It's a really good result already, regardless of if they beat Denver. But I
Mhm.
still think for the confidence and the overall outlook on this team and what they could potentially do this season, it would be great to get a win, even minus Jamal Murray in Denver.
Yeah.
I think it would be huge. And so I certainly don't want the players to be thinking that, this game against the Nuggets is a free hit and that, they can just go out there
Mhm.
and not really be too concerned about whether they lose or not. So hopefully we see a full 4 quarter effort from the Warriors, and if they lose and they're not quite good enough, then so be it. I think that was the case against Cleveland. Like I couldn't fault the effort the other night against the Cavs. Like I,
Yep.
I thought they battled hard down the stretch. They probably could have. Again, last season when they went down double digits at halftime, they probably allow that to be a blowout and lose by 20 plus kind of thing. The fact they got it back to 4 or 5 points late in the game, I was pretty proud of the effort, to be honest. And the Cavs were just better team on the night. It is what it is. But yeah, certainly looking forward to the Nuggets one. And we were just mentioning before we started here that no NBA games on today, and I actually didn't know why. Apparently, it's elections or whatever. So go out and do that for those in America that haven't already. But otherwise, much planned for you for the rest of the day.
Nope, no NBA, so I gotta try and find something else to do. Maybe it'll be college basketball if there's some on for that. But again, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure coming on here, and I appreciate it.
No, no worries at all, mate. It's fantastic to have you on. Always a great chat. And we'll have to do it again in 6 weeks, couple of months, whenever it may be. And let's hope that the
Mhm.
Warriors move and continue in this form as we go throughout the season.